You are watching and listening to Chris and Leicester Till I Die TV on YouTube and your favourite podcasts.
Right, Chris.
Oh, hang on a second. You see, this is what happens when you have sloppy seconds. There we are. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good night, good day, goodbye, hello. Wherever you are in the world, one of those will apply to you. And welcome along to Leicester Till I Die TV and to a brand new Leicester channel as well, for fuck's sake. I've got to be careful how I say that. At last, we've been saying for ages that this guy needs to be doing his own channel. Finally, he's listened to us and he's got one out. And if you want to know anything at all about football, about tactics, this is the guy. So please get over to that channel, for fuck's sake. The link is in my description below if you're watching on my channel. We support all Leicester channels here, bar one. And no name, no pack job. Do get over there and subscribe now and make sure you give him your support. And Neil, sorry to have kept you waiting, mate. Welcome along and congratulations on your new channel.
Thank you so much. What a lovely intro that was. I've said this many a time. I have listened to you and Brad, you yourself as well, on the channel many times over the years. A guilty pleasure of mine actually on a Sunday night is to walk around the local park with my AirPods in and listen to you. And there have been several times I've literally burst out laughing, and I think people are probably looking like, what is this weird guy doing? But I really like the show. I think it's a really good take.
Thank you.
You know,
really,
I just
say you did worry me then. I did wonder where you were going with that.
Apologies for that. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, it was probably long overdue. I think the thing is that I agree with you. Like, I think everyone should follow all of the channels, and I always think it's important that everyone tries to give like their own spin, not just their own personality. So that's the sort of niche that I've tried to carve out, trying to be like objective. You know, I'm quite an analytical person, although it's kind of funny, not always, funny enough. But I think when it comes to football, you know, as people say, it's a game of opinions. But I think it can be more than just a game of opinions. And I think if you think about if you were in charge of a football club or you were the manager, you know, you're looking to try and maximize and take the element of chance away. So that's sort of where I'm going with it. Yeah, the idea is that to kind of have a comprehensive look after games, try and examine what's going on and why, and try and make sense of it. So that's the idea for Fox's sake. And sadly, I would say maybe that is a sort of opinion that people are thinking about the upcoming season. We can discuss that a little bit in terms of how do you think it's going to go. But look, of course, that subtle play on words, it's always been a little pun. I do like my dad jokes. I'm not going to lie to you, Chris.
No, indeed. I think, you know, when we do get to talk about the you know, what we think about the season, I think my little furry friend here to our left or right, whichever way you're looking at it, the look on his eyes probably sums up how we're all feeling at the moment. But let's start with some positive news. And we've made a signing.
We have.
Or we're about to make a signing.
Heard this before. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, it seems to be. I mean, who do you believe? That's the thing. But it's coming from Sky Germany, and Sky tend to be pretty much, you know. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you believe it's going to happen? We need a striker, don't we? Let's be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like dominoes right now. I think. Do you know, it's one of these things of like Steve Cooper only wants one thing, and it's disgusting, and that thing is transfers. It seems after his Forest, I think he's got a problem. No, look, to be fair to him, we need to get players in over the line at minimum because we just don't have a deep squad. This one, I think. So I'm guessing you're talking about Adam Hosleg, and I believe this one is likely because I know that we've had interest in him several times before. He's very highly rated. I can speak a little bit about him in a moment, but I'm pretty sure he will come in. I have to say that if you've ever seen the Fox's Talk forum, they're also claiming quite a few other things are happening. So I wouldn't be surprised, Chris, if by the end of this show we have confirmed one or even two signings. Maybe neither, but it really wouldn't surprise me.
It would be nice to do it live, wouldn't it?
Could be.
The thing is, I mean, look, you know, we know, well, we're going to talk about what has pre-season taught us, but yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that we need a striker. We've got three. One that he doesn't seem to trust because, you know, one goes off injured and he brings a winger on up front, although he's tried that in a couple of times this pre-season. Jamie, look, we know what Jamie Vardy brings to the table. But he's still, the problem is at his age now, he stubbles his foot and he's out for a couple of months. We can't rely just on him. Dako has obviously got this, his medical boot on. Maybe put him on the pitch with that on, he might be able to find the back of the net. I'm being unfair, but you know what I mean. What I mean. But yeah, I'm positive that he's young. My only worry is, when we have a commitment to buy, which apparently we have with this one, we've got him a loan, only 17 million, and he's a youngster here. But if we stay up somehow, let's say we stay up by the skin of our teeth, and he's scored 1 goal all season, we have to buy him.
Yeah, but I mean, we could have bought him and still had the same result, I would say. I'll give you some information on the player. I did a bit of research on him because he's come up quite a few times. So he tends to be, he can play kind of either as a wide forward or as a striker, which is interesting. The thing I heard is really interesting is that when he was at Sparta Prague, he's a Czech international, he was the best talent that they considered that they've ever produced from that academy. And obviously Czechs have quite a good record. However, what they do say is the player himself, he's hardworking, he's talented, he's physically gifted, but he does seem to have confidence issues. And they said that, for example, in the Czech league, whenever they were playing like the big top of the table clashes, he'd often go missing. And that's also been the case for the Czech national team. So it was no surprise to their club that he would get a big move. And he obviously went to Leverkusen. That's a pretty big team. And they were in Europe at the time. It hasn't quite worked out for him. But I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I get kind of Yuri Tielemans vibe where Yuri Tielemans was amazing for Anderlecht. He went to Monaco. Monaco was too big of a move too quickly. He went on loan to a Midlands club called Leicester. Didn't do too badly. Sadly, it ended not the best way, but he did definitely make an impact. Definitely one of our favourite players for a while. So I think it could be something like that. I think what I just want to paraphrase, though, is that I think what we might be guilty of is expecting some of these signings to come in and they're going to be like the new Jesus and they're here to save us, or Moses, and take us to the promised land. And what I'm saying is that Leverkusen had an absolutely absurd season last year. They were unbeaten in the league. They did the double and they were 1 game away from winning the treble. But a certain Ademola Lookman, who we all love on this channel because we really respect him. I wish we could have signed him, scored a hat-trick in the Europa League final. So they've allowed this player to leave. And what does that tell you? That tells you that as of right now, this is not a guy that's coming in red hot form, right? He needs to rediscover his form. And so that would just be the issue, is that look, that could be the case for many of our players, right? They could play at a sort of form. That gives them the high ceiling. That's why we've got them. But it's like, to be honest, I don't think it's going to be the case of any of our signings, apart from maybe one, which maybe I'll talk about a bit later. I don't really think there's any players coming in who I would, put my house on. They're going to make a guaranteed impact straight away. That's not to say he won't do. But I think we just got to give some of these players a chance.
But do you think, and I'm an old bugger, and I can remember the likes of when Kevin Keegan, for example, went, and I always quote this, went from Stockport, I think it was, to Liverpool. He didn't see the first team for about 6 months. He was working his way through. He was training with the reserves when we used to have reserves in those days. These days, they come in, they sign on the Monday, they're playing on the Saturday. And sometimes they're thrown in. And they either sink or swim. Now, like when we had Fofana, whatever you think about him, when we signed him, he definitely swam.
Yeah.
Atawu, he definitely swam. Other players, it can take them a while, like Kashidai. I don't know whether he would have been good or not, because obviously he went back. But because Fatawu would come in and Mavididi to a degree and done brilliantly from the start, we kind of expect that from all the players nowadays, don't we?
Yeah, definitely right to bring that out. And I would say 2 or 3, I actually can think of 3 players that are pretty pivotal to Leicester that didn't have the best starts. So I think Ricardo, in his first 4 or 5 games, a lot of people said he was a terrible signing. He was getting caught out, and then he turned into a fantastic player. Yes. For me, James Maddison looked okay when he first started, but he certainly wasn't the Maddison by the time he left, where he looked like an absolute top player in the Premier League. And there's also another player you might have heard of him. He's called Jamie Vardy. He was kind of okay, but he certainly wasn't David Nugent or even Chris Wood at the time, I would say.
No,
you could even say the same about Riyad Mahrez. Riyad Mahrez came in, but it was Anthony Knockout who was the star at the time. And both those players, obviously, a bit later, they found their form and they became legends for the club. So definitely agree. But of course, fans will be frustrated because these players are coming in late. That is a big problem. and we're going to be up against it. And my fear is that last time we went down, we actually only went down by 2 points. And if we'd have sacked Brendan Rodgers, let's say 1 game earlier, and/or got Dean Smith in, because even though people weren't the biggest fan of Dean Smith averaged more than a point a game. So if you've averaged that out for a season, that would have been 38 points, and we went down, I think, was it with 34 or 32? So, that's the point.
I think Dean Smith did as best as he could with what he'd got. And I think from what was available at the time, Andy brought, bringing Shaky with him, that, and rest in peace, Shaky, obviously, but I think that was a plus for him. I think, he was given a bit of an easier ride because he had, Craig Shakespeare with him. But do you think as well that a lot of this, it's like we've taken this long to find a replacement, if you like, for Riyad Mahrez, because everybody that's come in has been compared to him. And every striker we bring in, he's not a Jamie Vardy, is he? Oh, we need another Jamie Vardy. And I think it's like putting these players, expecting too much of them, like you say, too soon. And we're not going to suddenly get the next Jamie Vardy straight away. And as like you said, he took almost a full season to get into it.
Yeah, I would say, especially with Jamie Vardy, my honest opinion is I don't think we will ever find a striker as good as him. No. Just to put it into context, Jamie Vardy won the Golden Boot for Leicester City. And that was the season outside of the Premier League winning season. He didn't even win the Golden Boot this year. So that's aside from that. So I'm just being realistic. When's the next time we will sign a striker that in a 38-game season will score 23 goals? That's top class level. I don't see it happening.
I don't either. People, fans will always be saying, "Oh, wish we had Jamie Vardy back and all this." But look, it is what it is. Anyway, pre-season ended on a bit of a dampener at the weekend. I was hoping for a little bit more because that was the last game before, obviously, the Tottenham game, and I was hoping that we might see the starting 11 or as close to the starting 11 subject to new signings. That's the starting 11. I'm worried, but it's been a hard lesson, and I know it's pre-season, and look, I don't think we've had a pre-season where we can watch the number of games that we have done this season. Yes, there's the odd one, and when I started my channel, the first ever game I did with Brad was the Birmingham friendly at the training ground, but I've been analysing these, and I know almost like they're league matches, and they're not though, are they? But it's been a bit disappointing. But then look, we've got to remember they are only pre-season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'll give you my perspective on things. Look, I'll before we get to it, so I've prepared a presentation for you. I'm going to talk about it. It's pretty comprehensive. And since the last time I was on your channel, we spoke about the Shrewsbury match. And I was just actually re-listening to that in the morning when I was in the gym. So I remember what we talked about. So I'm going to kind of pick up the point from there and tell us what's been going on. Now, I sort of agree and disagree. I think that results actually are irrelevant. That is totally irrelevant. It doesn't actually matter if you win 5-0 or lose 5-0. But performances and patterns of play and the structures, these are very important. Because if you're trying to coach a team, you want to set them up a certain way, or maybe you've tried something and it's either worked or it hasn't worked. And I will be, as part of this presentation, be giving you direct reference to this time last season when Enzo Maresca was also a new manager that came in who wanted to instill a new identity. And I think that's where it's maybe not going to look so good. What I will say is that first and foremost, I think this presentation is going to come across as quite negative. But what I want to say is that look, I am a diehard Leicester fan. Leicester till I die, you might even say.
Yes.
And I really want Steve Cooper to succeed. I've got nothing against him. I was actually quite positive when he came in because I think that he had like a good background with youth team players. He gets on very well with the fans. I heard that at the recent fan presentation open day that they did, that he was well received by the fans and stayed afterwards and took photos and was very nice guy. So I would love for him to succeed.
Yes.
But as I said in my channel, I try and be objective. I want to look at things, and I will also offer, some constructive criticism, as we would say, some suggestions on what I think does and doesn't work and what we might need to do. Because Otherwise, and look, I don't even need to make this up, but the official Leicester City YouTube channel, they posted extended highlights of the Lons match. Those clips were 11.5 minutes. And in those 11.5 minutes, there isn't one single passage of play they showed that shows either a Leicester City move or attack. Not one.
I did wonder how they got 11 minutes out of that game.
Well, they just showed Lons. That's the thing. And I kind of quoted it, and I said that in that game, we saw an upcoming British manager playing a very attractive style of football, showing passing out from the back, rotations, great attacking patterns of play. The problem is that manager was Will Still, who was the Lons manager, and it was his team. And he really kind of made us look a bit foolish there. But you know what? I'm not just going to look at that game. For that reason, I'm also going to look at the Augsburg game, because that one, to be honest, if we just looked at the Lons game, this would probably be the most depressing show of your life. So I want to try and give both Cooper, the club, and some more. So if it's okay, I can kick off with it. But if you want to, before we start, I'm happy.
By all means, yeah. And just to say that if anybody's interested, there is a show, Let's Talk Leicester Extra, from yesterday. We had Kate on and we had Craig on, who were both there at the managers' Q&A, and they both spoke very highly of both the managers, male and female teams. And can I just say, from a personal point of view, Steve Cooper was one of my 3 choices. So as much as I criticise, and like you say, it's the manner of the loss that gets me, not the fact that we lost. It's the manner of the loss. But it was one of my 3, and I know there's a certain presenter on both our channels that wants him sacked now, and I think that's a little bit premature. I'm behind him, and of course I want him to do well. And I think at the moment I still think he's the man for the job. But I just wanted to say that. But no, you make a start, and I'm looking forward to this, Anil.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. So what has pre-season taught us? This is the pre-season review on Leicester Till I Die. I'm going to start by looking at 2 games. I'm going to be looking at the Lons game that we played. But before that, well, just to talk about this, we just kind of mentioned this already. But this game was really, really poor. Here are the stats, just to kind of point this out for everyone. So Lons won 3-0. They had more possession than us, more touches, more passes. But the really sad thing is Lons had 17 goal attempts. We had just 2, of which only 1 was on target. And as mentioned before, in the extended highlights, there isn't a single passage of play to show from Leicester City attacks. That was really, really bad. Now, I am going to go into that. But because, I want to ease ourselves into it and give us something a little bit more positive to talk about first, I want to talk about the game before that. So before that, on the 3rd of August, we played in Germany, and we played against a team called Augsburg. Now, they are in the Bundesliga. They're in the top flight as well. They would also be a team, I think, that's going to be battling for relegation places to stay up. So I think it's kind of a fair game, although I would say that the Bundesliga overall is probably at a slightly worse level than the Premier League. Now, in this game, unfortunately, Augsburg also won this game. So we've lost the last 3 games. But if we look at the stats for this one's a lot more promising. In this one, we actually had more possession. We had 11 goal attempts. Around a third of those were on target. So unfortunately, Augsburg had more chances, and they obviously scored from their chance. But overall, if you look at this, we had more control of the game. And if you look at the tackles here, we made 28 tackles. So we actually did get about things. I'm going to show you some examples of this. So we had a high press, and we had more of an aggressive thing. So I think if we're trying to understand what Steve Cooper's doing, of all of the games that were on in pre-season, this one was the one where I think had the clearest identity, the easiest one to pick apart and to try and get an idea of what we could expect to see on Monday, barring the personnel, because the way that it's going, we could have a whole new team on Monday.
Yeah.
So let's start with the formation and system, which is already a big talking point. So this is how we lined up against Augsburg. So normally we start in a 4-2-3-1. So we had Patson Daka up front. New signing Bobby Reid came into the team as a 10, although that 10 kind of shifts around. We had the classic Mabadidi and Fatawu. We had Winks and Ndidi. And as mentioned the last time I was on the show, a big difference this season is that rather than Ricardo playing next to Harry Winks, it's Ndidi. And Ricardo, in fact, isn't in the starting 11 at all, which is something that I personally think is a mistake, but I'll come to that later. Victor Christiansen came into the team. Now, last season, we didn't have an out-and-out left-back at all. We did have a left-sided centre-back, who was either Callum Doyle or James Justin, but now we've got an actual out-and-out left-back. And as it turns out, that is probably the biggest change in terms of what we do. So here's how we kind of lined up, as you can see on the screen in terms of the formation. But I've got some videos here to watch, and I'm going to talk about Victor Christensen. So this is right from the kickoff of the game. And Victor Christensen is here, number 16. And you can see already, look how high he's pushed up to the pitch. He essentially has become a left winger. And that is his role in the team. So when we're in possession, you can see we've got 3 at the back here. We've got Winks and Ndidi playing as a double pivot. But in attack, look at this. Christensen, he is over here. And this is Steffi Mavadidi, number 10. Now, if this was last season, it'd be Steffi Mavadidi who would be in Victor Christensen's place. And we can see that the ball gets played out to Christensen and he whips in a cross and it's dealt with. But already some attacking intent. Now, what was a bit sad about this game is this was the only cross that Christensen put in the entire game. And he did it in the first 16 seconds. I want to show you some other things. So you can see we've got 5 at the back here. We're using these 2 midfielders very close to one another. And we're trying to entice Augsburg to come onto us. Like Vestergaard, who's playing here. You come to me, and as soon as one of their players jumps, we're going to start putting the passes together. So you can see we're trying to play out from the back. We're doing these intricate passes. Here we've lost the ball, but look, we've won it back quickly with a high press. We've played it out. Here's Winks. He's gone high up the field and plays it into Christensen. And you can see we've now got 3 players attacking the box, a 4th one coming in, so 5 attacking the box. So that's going to kind of give you an idea of what we're trying to do here. So, yeah. Is that the same video? Yes, it is. So we've got Christensen supporting as the winger in attack. That's what I'm showing here in this kind of red circle. You see how out the pitch he is. And you can see it's Mavadidi and Christensen combining. But the big difference is that Mavadidi is basically taking up the same spaces that Kiernan Dewsbury Hall was taking at last season. So that's like a big question for us. Our best player, factually, has left. He had 26 goal contributions last season.
Yeah.
He's gone to Chelsea. How are we going to replace him? Now, we have since signed an attacking midfielder since this game was played, which is Facundo Buonanotte. But it's because we didn't, this was the approach that he tried to do. He moved Steffi Mavadidi inside a little bit. So here you can see from my high-class technical drawing, not the best at paint, apologies to everyone, but trying to explain what happened. So Christensen moved from a left-back position all the way up to become a left winger. Fatawu still remains as the out-and-out right winger. Mavadidi shifts inside, and Bobby Reed, who is in the central, kind of moves out wide. So we're kind of replicating that kind of same system, but instead of 2 attacking midfielders, you could call them 2 10s instead. Daka would sometimes drop deep to act as a false 9, and I'm going to show you some clips of that. So all the strikers that we've been linked with, they're expected to be able to join in the build-up of the attack, maybe look for the balls in behind to try and drag defenders out with them. We play with this back 3. So although we start with a back 4, because Christensen's pushed up the pitch, Fass in this case had to move over to make sure we've got some cover there and just into the other side. So that was very similar to last season. And then of the midfield 2, what's kind of interesting is that Winks is the one who tends to sit, although he played that pass in that previous clip. And you'll see that as we play, Ndidi bombs forward a bit and tends to join in with the attacks in this game. In the second game against Lens, Ndidi actually played as one of the number 10s, which is a bit crazy, but I will show you that in a moment. But in this game, this is how it worked. So on paper, it is sort of working a little bit like last year. And Steve Cooper did say that he wasn't going to change it up too much. Now, I kind of disagree with that, but I do sort of see where he's coming from that perspective. So again, just want to run this clip. Now we're high up the pitch. This is very similar to last season. Again, look at this intricate passing. We did this last year. Mavadidi, you can see he's moved infield. And look again, there was Christensen outside on the whip, providing the whip. And then we switched the ball over to Fatawu. Fatawu's got the ball, and you can see Bobby Reed's made this inside channel run. And we've dinked the crossover and Daka, and that's a decent attempt. And I like seeing this because I think this is quite reminiscent of the best stuff we did last year. So the best stuff we did last year is we pushed right up the pitch. We tried to control the game. We tried to shift the opposition around. And quite commonly, what we did is this exact move. But we try and compress play over to one side to isolate our other winger on the other side who's completely free, in this case, Fatawu. And Fatawu, we mentioned the Mahrez comparisons, is if you can isolate Fatawu one-on-one with a defender, that's a great position for us to be in because Fatawu is really good at beating his man. So here you can see Winks has played it into Mavadidi. He's sort of dipped inside, so he's not hugging the touchline. You've got Christensen. And then Fass has spread it out wide. There it goes. Boom for Fatawu. He's one-on-one. He can play the little ball in. Reed, that's a decent cross. And, you know, that wasn't a goal, but that, for me, is quite promising to see that. That I can see a clear structure. I can see what we're trying to do, how it may or may not work. So that's...
Can I ask, sorry, at this point, sorry, just to ask, because I was very much a fan of Christensen, and I wanted, you know, I was glad when he came back, and I know he didn't fit into Enzo's plans. It was almost like like you say, he was almost getting in the way. He likes to get forward. But in this game, like you said, he got very few crosses in, because whenever he got the ball, he wanted to. He was playing it back. He was he wasn't looking to get the cross in. But then, was there anybody in the box a lot of the time for him to get the cross in for?
That is a good point. I was looking back at the game, and it often was. But I think what you've just identified there is exactly my concern as well. So Christensen, if you look at him statistically, even last season, he played for Bologna, who finished 4th in Serie A. That's an amazing achievement, and he played a lot of games. But I think he only had 2 assists over the whole course of the season. And what I'm saying is that his attacking output just isn't there. And so what I feel we've done is we've taken Steffi Mabadidi, who is one of our best goal contributors in terms of goals and assists. We moved him inside, and the player that we've then put to replace him is someone who is not going to contribute. And you're right, every time we receive the ball, perhaps I should have put a little compilation clip together, but he just kept cutting inside over and over again. And it was so frustrating. In fact, like I say, it was only when I was making the clips for today that I found that he made a cross, and he literally made it 20 seconds into the game. And I felt like, did he give up just because there wasn't someone in the box in the first 20 seconds? It's like, come on, lad, you need to mix up your game. I have heard that we may be looking for a left back, and it could be something we want to do, but I would like to say that I feel that sort of like the elephant in the room here is that we've taken Ricardo out of the team. And what I would say is, in the last friendly that we looked at, the Shrewsbury one, what actually happened is we tried the same system, but instead of Christensen being in the team, it was Ricardo in the team. And Ricardo was the one that was pushing up to make the additional winger. So still not quite the same position as last season, but I think Ricardo is much better. Like, he scores goals and assists. So we'll kind of come to that in a moment. But again, look, just going through the presentation and show the examples. So here we actually do have 5 people in the box. Christensen's actually the second furthest forward. And in this case, if we could have got the ball to him, he would have had a tap in. So he was, he's probably got a good engine on him, despite the sort of thing, lack of attacking output. Just to call out some other things as well. So here's that back 3 shape that I talked about, and the 2 here. And we'd have 5 in attack. And yet here's the double pivot of Ndidi and Harry Winks. And, you might ask yourself, like, well, why do we have this kind of 5 at the back, 5 forwards? And actually, that's a question for you, Chris. So it's very trendy, I've got to say, these days in football. It hasn't always been. It's only really been, I would say, since Thomas Tuchel came to the Premier League. But why do you think that teams put 5 forward instead of, let's say, the usual 4?
This is why I have you on to answer these questions.
Oh, no worries. I don't want to catch you out or anything like that, but it's just something I like to get the audience involved too. But what it is that most teams will defend with a back 4 when they're in their defensive phase, which we'll come to in a moment. So quite simply, if you've got 5 and they've got 4, 5 is more than 4, and that means that on paper, you should be able to make more opportunities. So that's why a lot of the top teams are trying to do that. Now, the danger is if you get caught out on transition, you've got 1 man less, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit of stick or twist to it. But the top teams, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, that's what they're all doing. Anyway, we'll come to that in a moment, but that is going to be relevant. But what you can see here, so this was something that I talked about. I showed you in the diagram, Ndidi pushing forward. And so we've got this back 3. This is actually in the second half. Harry Winks here is the deepest player, so he's looking to receive the ball. But Ndidi, who I've ringed here, is really pushed up quite upfield. So this is actually quite aggressive. It's got pros and cons again. The cons are that if Winks gets robbed here, he hasn't got a simple pass to a teammate, which is what we would use Ricardo for last season. However, the advantage is that if he has enough time to turn and spin, we could find an extra man upfield. So that's something that I've noticed. And it'll be interesting to see if we stick with that or not, because just to give you a kind of rewind, when Brendan Rodgers was in charge, we started really well and we had Ndidi at the base of this kind of attacking play. But what happened is a lot of people said Ndidi lost his form. But I can tell you, although that's partially true, one of the reasons why he lost his form is that most teams realised that that was the player that you should target, because they were looking for Ndidi to be the builder. And if you could rob the ball of Ndidi because he wasn't the best of his feet, you could get at Leicester. And when teams worked that out, what Brendan Rodgers did is in the second season, he dropped Yuri Tielemans a bit deeper to play a 4-2-3-1. So that's a little bit of a history lesson for you. Just moving on, because I'm just conscious of time. So when we're out of possession, we go to a 4-4-2. So as I mentioned to you, it's a very common system. It works very well. So if we lose the ball and we can't get it back quickly, Christensen would revert back to the left back position. You can see that in this case, the 10, which is Bobby Reed, he actually pushes up with Daka. So they're trying to block the passing lanes. Mavadidi shifts over to the left-hand side. Everyone else pretty much keeps their same position. Now, as I mentioned to you, we got a lot of tackles in this match. So this was kind of interesting because when we get to the Lens match, we didn't do this very well. But against Augsburg, we were trying to high press. So you can see here the ball's been played from Augsburg back to their goalkeeper, and we're pressing, and we've actually have got 5 men in this pitch. You can't quite see them here. And this is Bobby Reid again. So I'm talking about the 4-4-2. So that's Patson Dagger here. This is Bobby Reid. Fatawi's here. So Bobby Reid is trying to block the goalkeeper from passing it to this player. Fatawi's blocking this passing lane. You can see that Ndidi's come up front to block the passing lane here. So there's only some difficult passes out to either this man or a chip pass to here. And so that's the idea of the high press. You're trying to put them under pressure so they play a bad ball out, and that means you're more likely to win the ball back, and therefore you can get your attack started. And we did that sort of reasonably well. But as I'll sort of show you, especially in the Lons game, this is something that is definitely not as effective as it was last season. And there are dangers if you have an ineffective press. You can also see here some more of kind of trying to defend. That here we've got back three. Again, we're trying to block the lines. We can see that Ndidi has jumped. We've got Winks here on himself, and this time a defender's come up. So in this case, the Augsburg player, he's only got really, the only easy pass he's got, well, it's not even easy, is he's probably going to have to hoof it all the way to the other side of the pitch, which is this man. So again, you're putting him under pressure. He might cut back inside and play it back to the keeper. That's great. That means your entire team can push upfield and you put the opponent under pressure and you're trying to control the game. And that was what was really good about modern football, is that, you know, if you have the ball, your opponent can't hurt you. And if they do have the ball and they're in their own half, they're also not going to hurt you either. So these are the sort of principles that we're looking to play here. And just to show you that, of course, sometimes even the best laid plans of mice and men go awry, if you know that phrase. And when you really need to defend, you need to have a deep block of a 4-4-2. And this is quite common. Even the top teams like Man City will do this if they're really under pressure. It just doesn't happen too often. And that would be the case here. So you can see that when we're under the cosh, here you can see how many players we've got back defensively. And you can see here that Augsburg, they've got a front five as well. Very fashionable is what I've heard, Chris. But look at how many people they've got to beat. It's not just the back four, but because of the compact block, they're completely outnumbered here. And so I think that these basic principles are good, because when you're in a Premier League and you're playing really good teams, if you make it too easy for them to cut you apart, you're going to concede a lot of goals. Having a 4-4-2 is always difficult to break down, as we ourselves found last season, despite being the overwhelming favourites in the Championship. So that game, the Augsburg game, I'm going to get to the nasty game in a moment, but just to give this one, because there's a lot more positive to say about this one. I think overall, we had control of the game, as shown in the possession stats and the amount of touches. As I've shown you, I think it was quite easy to identify the offensive and defensive structures. They were pretty clear. I think in general, players weren't getting in each other's way, which I think did happen in the Shrewsbury game. Like there'd be two men standing in the same place receiving the ball, and that you'd expect when you're trying to teach a new system to people. However, if those things were the positive, I would say that the negatives were, you've just called it out yourself, Chris, you should be a pundit. Lack of creativity. I think Christensen out wide offered very little. That game, you know, for all of those, those stats, Augsburg had more chances on goal than we did. I think they're a bit unlucky not to score a second one, if I do recall. And we didn't really create much. I don't think we really looked like scoring. We didn't really use Mads to his strengths in terms of his distribution. There was a lack of movement and incisive passing. I'm going to show you some clips from last season. And a few times we got caught out on transition. So when Winks was by himself, you know, there wasn't someone else to help him out. So overall, that game, although I could see what we're doing, possibly not a surprise at the result, as it felt like a bit of a worse version of last season's tactics and setup. But I think overall, you could see what he's trying to do there. And that's probably going to be the blueprint going forward. So that was that game. But now, unfortunately, we're going to come to the horror show. So after seeing that game, I was pretty intrigued to see what we were going to do for the last friendly. And you're right, pre-season friendlies, do they matter or do they not? But this was the last friendly before we played the big game against Spurs, right? The first game of the season. And normally you'd expect to see your strongest lineup and probably the system or formation you're going to try.
Yeah.
So we did make quite a few changes here, and some were a bit odd, I found. So firstly, Mavididi was not in the team at all. And Bobby Reid was playing in that sort of like wing stroke 10 position. We brought Hamza Chowdhury into the team. And we kept Ndidi, but we pushed Ndidi up to be one of the 10s. So he did play as an attacking midfielder for us last year, but his starting position this time around was much further forward than it was last season. At the back, Vestergaard stepped out and Okoli came in. Fass kept his position, but he became the centre of the back three when we shifted to that shape, and he was the builder. So this was the formation that we went to. And I'll be honest with you, a bit concerned here, because I would have said that last season, three of our best players, I don't think it's unfair or controversial to say this, would be Steffi Mavadidi, Ricardo Pereira, and Yannick Vestergaard. Like or hate it, I think those were three of our more consistent and better performers. And in this particular lineup, they didn't feature. Now, look, they might have had fitness concerns. He might have wanted to try something else. So you cannot, be judge, jury, and executioner here. But it was interesting that we played this way for at least 60 minutes before making any formation changes. And again, as the match starts, Christensen's moving up to the left-hand side. You can see this is Bobby Reed, who's taking that Steffi Mavadidi position. Here I've got Ndidi, so I'm not making this up. Look how much further he is up higher to Chowdhury, and you've got Chowdhury and Winks playing next to one another. So there you can see that the same system, the same idea that he's trying to play against Augsburg, but he's changed the personnel. So now I'm going to show you some things. So again, this is right from kickoff. And again, as I mentioned in the previous clip, you can see that we're doing your favourite, Chris, passing out from the back. Here you can see Patson Daka's dropped in there to become a false nine. Did you see that? To try and pull that move to play behind. Fass has got it building. We're trying to provoke the press onto us, and it's working, right? There, the Lons players are getting forward. Mads is, then come on, come to me. Trying to drag the player. Now he's played a long ball upfield. Now here we've given it away, but you can see what he was trying to do there. We're basically trying to drag Lons upfield to make space, and then because Mads is really good at his distribution, he's going to try and chip it behind and find Daka on the run, one-on-one, who is really fast, and we have got a lot of pace in our team, and try and isolate a goal there. So, if I'm being honest, this is probably as good as it got in the entire game for Leicester, 30 seconds in. So that is the highlight. But again, you can sort of see what we're trying to do here. But now I'm going to sort of go to some things that didn't work so well. So I mentioned pressing in the last game being pretty good. Now I'm going to show you some pressing from this game. And this is a bit of a disaster. So Lons have got the ball here, and they've already pushed up the field quite high. This is something that we probably wouldn't have allowed last season. Here, we're not doing too badly. We're forcing this Lons wide player to go back again. So that's not bad. They're not able to get past the halfway line. Now play it to the keeper. Now you can see Fatawu's chasing, but he's chasing by himself. So their keeper's got an easy pass here to this man. Now this man's played it into another free man. Hamza's tried to get to him. He's been done. And now it's a bit panic stations, because now you can see there's a lot of free players here. This Lons player was totally free. You can play the ball here to another totally free player. And this, compared to last season, is a bit worrying. You can see that we've retreated now into the 4-4-2 defensive shape. But look how easy they've managed to get in, and they've put a shot on and it's gone wide. And this is quite dangerous for us. And so this has all come because of the way that we tried to press, or the lack of pressing. And the thing is, this was a hot day in France. And let me tell you, a bit like today, if you're running around on a hot day and you're not really getting any end product of it, all you're going to do is you're going to tire yourself out. And when you really need the energy, you're going to be out of it. So that was already a little bit of alarm bells that we saw there. Now, I'm going to compare that to last season. So this was us. You can see we're playing a variety of teams here. And you can look at this yourself. And I'll even ask you, what do you notice comparative to the previous clip that I showed you in terms of pressing? Here we're going to see a goal. So that's obviously one good thing about why you press in the first case. But after this goal goes in, you can tell me what you see from the next passage. This is against Southampton. And so what you're seeing is there's many more people forward. We're getting hold of the ball way quicker. And when we get it back, we snap into the counter-attack and we're making opportunities from it. This is twice in the same game. So Southampton have already made a mistake. They forced a mistake. Dewsbury Hall's got this here. Look at that. Easy ball in. McAteer, boom. That was 2-0 within 10 minutes.
As well, the other thing that I noticed is the closing down.
Yeah.
In that Southampton game, we were closing down well. And in the Lons game, we seemed to, when we did close down, we seemed to be rushing in, missing it completely, and obviously letting them come away with it. Our closing down basically was almost non-existent.
Yeah, it was done particularly poorly. So I want to kind of say, well, why is that happening? Because there are actually some reasons. So one of the big differences is that we are pressing with fewer men than we did last season. So you can see here that here's in that clip that I just showed you, and the Lons centre-back has the ball. So he's got this here, but in terms of pressing, like I would say already, this man on his left-hand side, Fatawu's here, but he is not going to get there if the pass is played to him. So he's not blocking the passing lane, as we get to call it. At least in this case, if he plays it to the right centre-back, there's someone who could jump to get him to make it more difficult. If this player wants to play it to this midfielder, he's been blocked. And if he wants to play it to this midfielder, he's been blocked. But it's not quite an efficient press. And the reason for that is because we've got one man less in the pressing phase. And that's because Victor Christensen, he is retreating back to form the 4-4-2. So this is where sometimes you could say, well, we'll be more solid if we have 4 at the back. But in some ways, we're making ourselves more open because he's not upfield, adding to the press. And so this is why it's going to be ineffective. So here, you can see you've just got 4 people, whereas before we would press with 5. So now you can see that Lons in this picture, they've got 5 players and we've got 4. In fact, there's another man over here as well. So they're going to be much easy. It's going to be much easier for them to find an extra man and essentially give us the runaround. And if you watch the game, that is pretty much the TLDR of what happened. We got given the runaround. And this is one of the reasons why. So in my opinion, kind of speaking about that, we're not committing enough people forward to press and we're not pressing impact, which I think is sort of what you were getting at the Southampton game. So in the Southampton game, when someone received the ball, there was like 3 people that got onto them straight away. Because the idea is that you want to win the ball back, let's say, within 7 seconds. Guardiola actually used to have a rule called the 7-second rule. When he was first training it in Barcelona, it's like, if you can't get it back in 7 seconds, then you get back into the defensive shape. But if you can, it means that their team hasn't had enough time to get back into their shape either. So you can actually turn mistakes into attacks. So we're too slow to press. You mentioned that yourself. We've got poor passing triggers. So, for example, Fatawi decided to chase that keeper down there. But why did he run 20 yards aimlessly? That's not a good look. He needs to be more efficient. Like, everyone's only got a certain amount of stamina, no matter how fit you are. We're not blocking all of the passing lanes, and it means that it's easy to play around the press. And so overall, you've got an ineffective press that tires out players and it creates gaps for opposition teams to work in. And later on in the presentation, I'll show you some of the goals that Lons scored. And essentially, that is what's happening. They've got way too much space. We can't get to them. It's men against boys. They can do whatever they want and they score some really nice goals. So that's that part of it. So now I want to talk about our build-up. So I have shown quite a few clips of it, but spoilers, the name of this video is Ineffective Build-Up. So here I'm going to show you a clip here. So we've got the ball, one of the few times that we did. Victor Christensen's taking a throw in, and it's gone back to a centre-back. This is a Coley, so he's on the ball now. Gone back to Fass. And now we've got our 2 centre-backs. Winks has played into Chowdhury. You can tell me what you think of that touch. But after that touch, now look at the way that Lons are streaming forward. They managed to play the ball to a completely free man in our defence. He cuts in, and he doesn't score, but that's pretty panic stations.
Yes.
So this is something that we were doing, and this is the sort of thing that I know you probably really rubs you the wrong way, because this is an example of when you're trying to play out from the back and all you've actually done is you've just completely gifted an opportunity for a top level team. And we know what the Premier League is like. And if you're going to give Heung-min Son, for example, if he got the ball there, because Son takes up that position, you can probably guess what the result's going to be.
Yes. I get with the playing out from the back that we've got possession. A lot of the times, and I noticed in this Lons game that Mads was having to go and booting it upfield, like we said earlier, a bit more. And if you lose the ball, and there's a 50-50 chance of whether you're going to lose the ball on a long pump up field, but if you do, it's not in a dangerous position. Now, I maybe kind of know where you're going to go with this, but one thing that again boiled my piss in watching this game is that we have got supposedly an international standard goalkeeper, very, very good. Why have we got a goalkeeper that can't take goal kicks? Because no matter which side of the goal the ball went out on, Mads picked it up and gave it to Coley to take. Coley passed it to Hermansen, who was then panicking because he's looking for somebody to pass it to. Passed it to a player who was probably being marked by 2 or 3 Lons players, or a couple of Lons players, and a couple of the times played us into trouble. Why isn't the goalkeeper taking the goal kick?
That's an interesting one. That's a bit different to the point I'm making here, but you asked the question, so I'm happy to explain it. So the reason why that's become quite in vogue is because what they're trying to do there is they're trying to, again, cause a pressing trigger for the opposition. So they know, for example, many coaches will tell their players that as soon as this centre-back or the goalkeeper kicks the ball, I want you to charge him down to block his passing lane. So I'm not defending it. I'm just trying to explain the logic.
No.
The idea is by passing it out to your centre back, you're going to make one of the defenders run at that centre back to close the lines, and then he can play it back to the keeper. And then you've now got one of their players who's out of position. And in theory, there is now a gap that you can find a place there. And you know what? Let me skip quite a bit forward because it's probably the best thing that I could do. I'm going to come back to this in a bit while. But I'm actually going to show you the first goal we can see. And look, this is the Lons keeper. And look, he's on the ball and no one's putting him under pressure. And so because of that, he's got time to find space. But can you see that at the start of the move, what's happened is that you've got a centre-back playing next to him. So he's actually acting as a centre-half. This is what Ahmad used to do last season. So that's the sort of thing that they're trying to do. I agree. Sometimes I think it looks really stupid.
More often than not, we didn't have that long ball up. More often than not, a Coley would take it to Mads, who would then just play it to the nearest Leicester player that he could see.
I agree. So that's why I'm saying this is kind of like, I guess, the theme of this part of the presentation is that we have had an ineffective build-up. So here we go. Here's your mate Mads here. And now can you see this is where it is working. So this was an example last season. And you can see by generating that sequence, now all of a sudden we're on the attack. We've got our 5 versus 4. This is Patel. We plays it into Ricardo. We started to move and we scored. So this is what I guess my point is that last season we were trying to do the same thing, but it was way more effective. And why was it way more effective? And that's sort of my point here is, yes, I think for sure, firstly, Okoli's come into the team, right? So is that a weakness? He was actually pretty poor in this particular game. The other thing is that, so this is what I want to show you, and I'll get to it. So this is very early in the Enzo reign. I'm trying to compare apples to apples here, which I think is fair enough. So this was in the very first pre-season game that we as Leicester fans got to see under Enzo. And this was against Burton Albion. So you can see we've still got Castagna and Albrighton playing in the team. We had Madivadua playing in the team as well. We even had Suter coming on late in the second half. A lot of these players have gone now. But what you could see is that already from the first game, there was a clear identity. We were trying to make this box midfield, and we had Ricardo Pereira in the team. And what I want to do is compare the shapes of the two teams, because my point here that I'm trying to get at is that I feel this is a case of Steve Cooper copying Enzo Maresca's homework, but he also hasn't understood how Enzo got his answer. He's just copied it. And that's why we've got some mistakes. So here, if we compare the two things, even though there's sort of a flipped field, you can see very similar ideas. So here you've got this double pivot with 2 attacking midfielders in front of them. Same thing, 2 double pivots here and 2 attacking midfielders. But the difference is, for example here, Wings is playing it to Chowdhury, but Chowdhury, look where his body shape is. He's facing his own goal. That means for him to get the ball and play it to one of these attacking midfielders, which is what he wants to do, he would have to get the ball, spin and turn and play it. And look how close all of these 4 players are. The likelihood of him being able to do that and not lose the ball is extremely slim, which is why he does lose the ball. Whereas if you look at here, look at these guys' body shapes. Okay, they're facing toward the other goal. They managed to turn the ball. And you can see that the 2 players in front of them, this is Dennis Pratt and this is Dewsbury Hall. And you can see that, look at his position here. When the ball comes to him, because he's on the half turn, if you look at my body shape here, then people can see it. If the ball comes to me, I can receive and turn, and I'm off in that way. If it goes to Dewsbury Hall with his left foot, because left-footed player, he can come to him like this, and he can spin this way. And so that simple thing, it's one of those things where sometimes people say that, oh, it's not the manager's fault that the team can't pass. And to some extent, that is true, right? But what I'm saying is that's not as true as you might think it could be. There are things you can do with the specific positions that players take up and the way that their body shape. And this, Chris, is called coaching. And that is the point, right? So when you did your level 1 and you're talking about kids, it's like, sure, if you're receiving the ball and you're not even looking at it, you're not going to be very good at receiving the pass. It doesn't matter if the pass played to you as well. So it's all about getting your body shape right. So these things are costing us. And these small tweaks, I said I try to be constructive as well, could make a big difference. And, coming back then to, the effective build-up, I'm just going to show you some more examples. I'll kind of skip it a bit forward. So it's clips that we've not seen before. So let's bring it forward again. So you can see that, from these clips, look at how simple the tap-in goals are because we've done this effective press. So again, just playing it around in the build-up, people being in the right space. Here's Ricardo. You can see he's got time. His body shape means he can play it on the half turn, plays into Dewsbury. Look at this. It's just, it makes the game look effortless, right? But that is the result of good coaching. And, it's very simple. So again, look, took it on the half turns, beating his man, plays it through. This is Ndidi. Look at that. That is absolutely fantastic. Same players, pretty much, arguably even worse than the ones that we're bringing in. But because the coaching was done in a very developed way, look at that. Ndidi comes in, dinks a little cross. Look how easy that is. And look at that. Can't miss the goal. This was our team less than 90 days ago that we were playing like this. So, yeah, that's the sort of slight worry. So, as I'm saying, what my point is, I'm saying I feel that the players selected for the roles are not best suited for the task. So we've tried Ndidi in that position and we tried Hamza Chowdhury in that position. But one player that we didn't try is Ricardo Pereira, even though many of the clips I've shown you from last season, he was the key man. The body shapes and angles aren't optimal, and that is causing a problem, and that's something that's got to be addressed. And the distances aren't right either. And so overall, you've got an ineffective build-up, and this is the problem. If you have an ineffective build-up, what you're doing is actually worse than if we just sat back in 2 banks of 4 and just tried to play on the break. Because if we did that, we might not have the ball very much, but would be very hard to beat. But in this case, if we lose the ball like we did there, half our team is upfield and the team who is back is completely out of position and they're in big trouble. And as I said in that sequence, someone was completely free and on a better day, they would have scored. So that's kind of the alarm bells. So now I'm going to do sort of Alan Shearer / Alan Hansen, probably for you and I remember that. And Alan Hansen will always be about, it's a terrible defending, a terrible Scottish accent, even worse, right? But I think that this is important to sort of look at it, right? Because, yeah, I think I was really impressed with Lons. And, I showed this goal before, but I'm going to show you the whole sequence. The goal actually comes from a corner. But if you see this whole sequence of play, long field, ball upfield, Christensen's head it back, not bad. Okoli gives the ball away here. It's come back to him. He loses it again. Bad touch. It gets crossed. Mads actually makes an outrageous save there. That should have been 1-0 already, but he's kept us in it. Now we retreat to a back 4 shape, and now we're trying to prevent the ball from being crossed into the box. And to be fair, this we're not doing a bad job of. You can see that Lons keep playing it around. They don't cross it in. The opportunity isn't really there. So they're going to try and switch play to the other side because they can see that it's a bit tough, and that's what they've been coached to do. So here it goes, out to the other side. Now they look for the inside channel run, quite similar to Endo ball. But we've defended that well. Harry Winks was aware, and we're back to a back position. So, Leicester and set pieces, we know we're in good place here, right? Because Leicester never have any problems with set pieces. So unfortunately, gets played quick, comes out to a man here, gets played outfield, no one closes him down, crosses it in, poor marking, and it's 1-0. A lot of that could be tweaked on it because that was a set piece and we got caught out with an early one. But I wanted to sort of show the build up to it, which I think was, worrying. So that's 1-0. And then very soon after, it's 2-0. And again, keeper has a lot of time, not being pressed, plays the ball outfield. We sort of get first contact, but second contact, we don't get anywhere close to it. And that's another problem with our pressing, is we're not being aggressive enough on the press. So now Lons have the ball, they're finding space, they're playing outfield, play it wide. Here, Christensen, for some reason, completely backs out of the challenge. You can see Mads going absolutely mental there to his colleague because he's probably saying, what are you doing there, lad? You absolutely need to block that shot. You cannot just stand off. But again, if I'm identifying it, it's a ball upfield. The first header could be better. But if we're not going to win the first header, this second one, we've got to clatter that man. It means you either win the ball or you foul him, one or the other. Because if you don't, this can happen, which is you give them free reign of the ball. And that's something we were very good at last season. It's something I'd call the cynical foul. So Harry Winks, for example, got quite a few yellow cards. I think he ended up with 12. And Harry Winks is not a dirty player, Chris. But Harry Winks knows that if someone beats him and it would be a 3-on-1 situation, you cannot allow that to happen. You've got to give them a tug there.
The other thing I noticed there as well was Chowdhury chasing the ball. And it was like, when you have those training sessions where you've got 4 players and they're passing the ball and one player trying to get it off them. And it looked like a little boy lost.
Yes, I would agree. And again, that's my point about personnel, the not being in the right place at the right time. Especially for someone who's so physical. Like I say, if he's not going to get the ball, we can check. Yeah, right. Look, he's just chasing, nowhere close to it. He's at fault maybe for 2 or 3 things. Although, like I say, I think it's really Christensen who has a moment to forget there, even looks down. So I think he knows that it's his mistake. But don't worry, Chris, it gets even worse. So here's the third goal. And apologies for that.
I wasn't expecting that then. I choked on my drink.
Yeah. And so here again, we can see that, look, we're trying to chase their ball. We're getting nowhere close to them. Look at how Lons are able to find the free man time and time again. They cut in. The challenges aren't coming. They retain possession. They keep it. They're dragging us all over the shop. Inside channel run. They cross it ahead. This could have gone in. It's saved. Doesn't rebound. They score on a rebound. And look how many people they've got in the box. And it compounds a poor day for Leicester. And, the score, I think, even flattered Leicester. I think, if I'm being honest, a 5-0 wouldn't have been unfair because the first half they were all over us.
Totally.
And you can see. And I think what's sad is that I did one on my own channel with Luke. And Luke said to me, what I'm really unhappy about is that Lons look like Leicester from last season. That's what we did to teams. And yet they're doing that to us. And it's sad to see. And he said, if it wasn't Leicester that they were playing against, he'd actually be really impressed with Lons. And he'd probably quite enjoy their style of play. But look, we're not here to kind of float their boat. But
no,
to be
do you think, though, of when we look at last season, look, Lons, finished 7th, I think it was, in the league last year. So, the top division, we're not playing, a Birmingham City here, or no disrespect. Well, yeah, disrespect to them, but you know what I mean, or Plymouth under Wayne Rooney. We're playing decent teams, and the same with Alburg as well. Top division team, weren't they? I think in Germany. We're kind of thinking, look, this is how we were last season, which we were winning every game that was coming our way for most of the season, and now it's new. We've got a new manager. We lost our manager. We lost our best player, and we're playing at a better level. And would we have learnt anything more if we'd been playing a Northampton, which we did last season, or a Burton Albion, or a Stockport County? Would we have learnt anything more by winning those sort of games than losing to top teams and in fairness to Lons and Augsburg, which they are top teams?
Well, I think that's a great question and a fair one to ask. But my counterpoint to that would be this. Last year, I did a show with Neil where we played Liverpool. And despite the fact that we lost 3-0 against Lons, we actually lost 4-0 to Liverpool.
We did. I'm looking at that now, yeah.
And not only did we lose 4-0 to Liverpool, but Mads made 2 superb saves. So the game could have been 6-0 to Liverpool. And I don't think that would have flattered them. However, after that game, I said to him, Neil, I've never been so sure we're going to win the championship in my life. And you might think, what? But we got battered in that game. No, we did not.
No, we didn't.
For that first 20 minutes of that game, we were completely playing around their press, cutting Liverpool apart and making chance after chance. And Casey McAteer should have helped himself to 2 goals. Liverpool then tightened up. They realised what was afoot. They were probably a bit surprised we were trying what we were trying against a team as good as them. And then they kicked into gear, and Mo Salah, Darwin Nunez, that alone is worth 100 million between them both, took us to pieces. But the reason I said to Neil why I was so confident is I said, to teach a system to a set of players who are going to be demoralised after relegation is extremely difficult to do. Even if it's only for 20 minutes, you can look better than one of the best teams managed by one of the best managers that we've seen in England probably for the last 20 years. That is impressive, extremely impressive. And that shows me that we're not going to be at full speed for game 1. We might not even be at full speed for game 10, but probably over the course of the season, we will get there. So that was my point. So what I guess I'm saying, and look, here I've got on screen my overall Lons thoughts.
I love your picture there, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's unfortunately, as I say, for Fox's sake, that's what I think right now. It's not just the name of my channel. It was a very worrying performance and result. There's major problems in almost all areas of the game. There's a lack of threat. Defensively, we're poor. Pressing from the Alburg game was much worse against Lons. Basically, I felt like we took a step backwards, and I can't really explain why. And this is a worry. Now, I'm going to be constructive and try and say things that I think that could be improved, but I'm just calling it as I see it. That, like I said, we got beat worse in, than Liverpool, and in this one we didn't do that good. But this is fair enough. I just want to say, I said that again, that like I'm not trying to be like I'm definitely not Cooper out or anything like that, right?
No.
What I'm trying to say is actually against Shrewsbury, although we weren't that creative, I could see there's some semblance of a system. Augsburg game we lost, but it was a more clearer system that we were doing. And it got a bit better despite the scoreline. But this game was a massive step back. And we didn't mention the Palermo game that we lost as well, where we also looked like we weren't going to score in a month of Sundays. So the reality is we had 3 games in a row. We didn't look like we were going to score in any of those games. And we were inferior for a lot of them. And so as a result, look, it's not surprising that the club looked to be very active in the market ahead of game one, because maybe that's what they've identified, that we need better players. But I'm saying that I think it's not necessarily the players. And I guess what I'm going to say in terms of like, okay, so I'm trying to be constructive here. I want to look back again. Okay, so we've literally just come off a 97-point season. We were the champions. And usually what tends to happen is teams that just get promoted, they're full of confidence, they know how to play, and they've got a bit of pep about them. They might not be as good technically as the teams that they're going to face, but they'll be up for it. And if you remember the last time that we got promoted from the Premier League, early on we had games against Arsenal where we got a draw. We got a draw against Everton. We then went on a bit of decline, but we even beat Man United, you might remember, in that infamous.
Waiting to see if you said that or not.
Of course. Yeah. That's probably one of the best games I've ever been to in my life.
Yeah,
Definitely in the top 3 for sure. Right.
Yeah.
But my point is that Man United were a better team than us on paper. They had much better players, but we had that positivity. And so I am worried that already the players don't seem to have that about them. So again, this is that game against Burton Albion. And I wanted to show this. That you mentioned, would we have learned that much? But here I'm seeing, look at this passing back and forth to cut them open and make space. Now, in the end, this move doesn't go anywhere. But my point is that when I saw this, I was like, wow, all these players know exactly where to stand at what phases of the game and what they're trying to do. Like Vardy's peeled off there, he's dinked in the cross, it hasn't gone anywhere. But look, there's someone even supporting it. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. That already looks quite good. And this is Stolarczyk, not even Mads. And they already look wings to Ricardo back to wings. Look how many people we've taken out of the game. From the same game again, now we're moving out wide. This is Albrighton, remember him? He's played it into Ndidi. Yeah. Ndidi is an attacking midfielder. Are you crazy? But look, the cross has come across, and your favourite mate, Daka, has put it high. Maybe not a surprise. Didn't have the protective boot on. Here again, this is Vestergaard. Oh, Vestergaard back in the defence. Is he mad? We've just signed Connor Cody. But this is what we were trying to do. That's Harry Suter there, believe it or not. Albrighton again out to Ndidi. Ndidi with the cross in. You know, it's looking quite threatening. Here's an interesting one from last season, right? So here, someone tried to press us. I believe this is Stoke, and they almost get in, but the team rushed back to try and defend. Ricardo gets it. Look how cool he is under pressure. Plays his way out. And now look, we've got a man superiority. It comes into this man here. He's charging down the pitch. Slots in a lovely ball here to James Justin, one of the centre-backs, plays it across. What a lovely finish that is. So what I'm suggesting, if I'm being honest, is I think we should go back to what we were doing last season. Because I feel that what we're trying right now is an inferior version of what was tried last year. And I think, look, I'm mentioning Ricardo a lot. I think that is the key player. And it really saddens me that I think Ricardo has been one of the best Leicester City players since he signed for us, to be honest with you. I know he's had injury problems, but every time he's fit, he can be a difference maker. Here again, the ball gets played out to Ricardo. Turns on the ball, under traffic. This is against Bournemouth, by the way. So I know you mentioned would our system work, but this was against Bournemouth in the cup. And our team was weaker than theirs, by the way. They did have Solanke missing, but otherwise they had a very strong team. Ian actually plays it back. It's going to go out back to Patawu. And, you know, okay, this is a fairly saucy goal. But again, we generated that goal by going back to front through
that game. I was actually at that game.
Oh, really? Of course, you're nearby, yeah.
Of course, yeah, I'm nearby. And we managed to get some extra tickets because it was the FA Cup. But, and I remember Enzo saying, like, don't judge our games against sort of, you know, Premier League teams about how we'll do next season. And I thought, well, hang on, no. The Chelsea one, no. The Liverpool one pre-season, no. But this one, because this is a sort of team that we could pretend that you look on at paper, no disrespect to them, but you look on paper and think we could get something from Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Would we get something from Liverpool? Probably not. You know,
that's right.
And I looked at this, and all right, Bournemouth were off the boil that day. They couldn't hit a barn door in a thing. That their striker looked about as, you know, up for it as Daka did. He was being picked on by the fans, but yeah, we very much held our own in that game.
Well, I agree, and I think we made them look bad, which is also another point. And you know, that's some sort of point. Or here again, like at the start of this move, Harry Winks actually kind of entices the player on. This is the move that I showed you earlier with Mads to Ricardo. That is Ricardo again facilitating the play. Of course, you've got Dewsbury Hall, who's an elite player, attacking with the 5. But look how many men. We could pass it to like 3 or 4 different people to score there. It's an easy tap in there. So what we were doing last season is when we got on the ball, like I showed it even against the Augsburg game, is the entire team pushed up really up high. But the two big things that kind of stood out to me would be this. One, you had Ricardo playing next to wings, and that meant you had two people that were experts at playing the ball under pressure. And in the Premier League, you're going to get pressed. And let me tell you, game number 1 of the season is against Tottenham. And Tottenham, with Ange Postecoglou, ranked number 1 for the highest amount of turnovers in the league. So there is no team, not even Man City, pressed as much as Spurs do. Okay? So if it was me, I would be putting... well, maybe, Chris. But what I'm saying is that if we played like we did last season, we could turn that into an advantage for us. If you were the sort of team that can deal with pressure and play out of pressure well and generate chances, you could beat that team. And we were that team. But I'm not sure we are anymore. That's something I want to point out. And the other
and I just want to bring back up this bit that Dan brought up earlier. Hopefully he's still with us. Forest fan, but he says, love Steve Cooper. It's a shame it seems he's already been shown the door by the fans before a ball has been kicked in anger. I mean, yes, it's a good point. And... yeah, I think that's because we've come off such a good season last season. But I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's been in this league before. He kept Nottingham Forest up, and virtually it was his team that stayed up and went as well last season. You know, it wasn't when they sacked him. There wasn't a lot of changes. Has he literally just been experimenting here? Are we reading too much into it, do you think?
I hope so, Chris. That's my honest answer. Because if he isn't, I think we're going to find ourselves in big trouble. And what I would say is I've seen multiple managers over the years make a big decision and it's not paid off for them. So do you remember when Ruud Gullit was in charge of Newcastle and he dropped Alan Shearer?
Oh, yes.
Didn't work out too well for him. Do you remember at one point, Claude Puel decided to play Damari Gray up top instead of Jamie Vardy? Probably not the smartest idea I think anyone's ever had in their life. And what I'm saying is, I think
sometimes though you take that chance. I mean, as I said to you before, I mean, I'm nowhere near at a coaching level that you were. Well, I haven't done it for years, so I'm nowhere near at all. But when I did it, I was very much the enthusiastic dad level. But I can remember we did a tournament one year, and I took the guy said, "Look, you know, you take it. You know, you've been the assistant, you've helped me out. You run the team." And the first 2 games, we could not score. We lost both games. And for the 3rd game, I said, "Sod it. I'm going to put my son up front." He was a defensive midfielder. I'm going to put my son up front. I said, "Let's just try it. You know, we've lost the 2 games. What's the point?" We won 3-0, he got a hat-trick, and we went through to the next round. So sometimes you can go, let's just try and see if that works. Of course, when it does, you're bloody brilliant. But it's got to come off, hasn't it?
It has, but I would say there's a big difference between elite-level football and that level. And
I know there is. But
my point was more this. I started at the top of the show by saying that the last time we got relegated by 2 points. So if you experiment in one game and that one game you lose instead of getting a draw or a win and you go down by that amount of points, that's going to be a very costly
But if he's experimenting now, before we start the season, now's the time to experiment. Like, I wouldn't have done that or been allowed to do that in a league game, but it was a weekend competition that was for just for a bit of fun. And we got away with it. And I think, my point is that sometimes it can work, but if you're going to try these things, do it now, pre-season, because you can look at that. Maybe he's looking at that going like, oh, I tried that and it didn't really work. Better not do that again.
Well, for sure. Look, at the end of the day, it wouldn't matter if we lost all 3 of those games by an aggregate score of 99-0. That's the fact.
Yeah.
They count for absolutely nothing. But what I'm saying is that, as I've identified, I think that things that we were strong at last season are now weaknesses. And I'm not seeing strengths take their places. That I think is the worry. What would normally happen is if a manager comes in and they change their style, it will work because it'll be like, okay, so now they're not as good as doing X, but they're better at Y. So you might have a coach, for example, who he much prefers to build everything through the middle. So you're not as dangerous out on the wings, be like, wow, look how good we look cutting through teams through the middle and making chances. Or, for example, Unai Emery came into Aston Villa and they play one of the most suicidal high lines you will ever see. But if you look for what team catches the other teams out offside the most, it's Aston Villa. And then you manage to turn that team around. So it can work in different phases in terms of what you're trying to play.
Do
As
you
I say-
think as well? Sorry, just to interrupt, but do
No,
you
go for it.
think this is a point I made controversially in another show before? Well, when Claudio came in, again, he came in with all these ideas. But what the difference to me was that he had Shakespeare from the previous regime, if you like. So if Claudio came in and said, "Oh, I'm thinking about playing player A in position 7," you could have Shakespeare there going, "Don't bloody do that. That's stupid. He can't do that." But of course, Steve Cooper hasn't got that because everybody that Enzo had went with Enzo.
That is 100% true. I do think though that people look at that season with blue tinted glasses. So I would say that Claudio actually did make some changes. At the end of the Great Escape season, we played a 5-3-2 with Mark Albrighton coming in as a right wing back. But in the season afterwards, he went to a 4-4-2 because Shinji Okazaki signed. So Mark Albrighton played on the left-hand side. Riyad Mahrez, who was not featuring that much in the Great Escape season, was brought in on the right-hand side. And we started with Gökhan Inler playing next to Danny Drinkwater. And we quickly realised that actually we signed this French lad called Kante, and he was a bit better in that position. And Marcin Vasilevsky, who was playing as one of those 3 centre-backs, was taken out of the team. And we actually started with Jeffrey Schlupp and Richie Delat. So he did make quite a few changes to that. I will say, to be fair, that the pre-season results were not particularly spectacular. And I think after seeing us draw with Birmingham and Oxford United, you probably wouldn't have thought that that team would go on to win the Premier League, but they did. But I am saying that he did make changes. And I think one of the reasons he did is that with Okazaki, it meant that when we were off the ball, because Okazaki worked so hard, it meant that we didn't need to have as secure the 5-3-2. And then later on, of course, he changed the fullback, which was probably the biggest difference when Christian Fuchs and Danny Simpson came in. All of a sudden, Leicester stopped conceding goals, but they kept scoring them. And then we just went on that amazing run. And the rest, as they say, is history.
But do you still? But do you think having that the Shakespeare sort of person there that would come with the previous regime would make a bit of a difference?
But yes, yeah. I mean, listen, I do 100% agree with you that I think in an ideal world, I think it's bad succession planning that we've lost the entire setup, right? And that's got to be quite alarming for the team. But at the same time, it's like Cooper's also got to take some responsibility, as I say, because look, I'm hoping, even though I've said all this and I've come across as very negative, I want nothing more than for us to say, we have won, we've beaten Spurs, what a great game. I don't even care if it's a terrible performance and we just like scrap one with 1-0. It's all about staying up this season. It really is.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But what I'm saying, and what I like to do on my channel, is that, you know, you would be asked to do a coaching report on another team or try and identify the strengths and weaknesses. And, you know, what I'm saying is if I had to compile a dossier for Spurs, for example, on Leicester, I would say we don't have much to worry about here. Can you identify ways in which we could beat Leicester? I could probably give you 6 different ways we could beat Leicester based on what I've seen here, right? And, you know, one of them is very sad. It's just let them have the ball. They won't do anything with it and they'll just give it away and we'll score off doing nothing, which is one of the worst things that you can possibly say. Now, Ange isn't going to go that way, I can promise you, because he plays a very one-dimensional style himself. He's very much plan A or nothing. So we have got major issues. But look, like I say, I want nothing better for us to do than to start the season well, right? But that's the issue. We've had 3 losses in a row. I don't think we've had such a bad pre-season in a very long time. We have a lot of the players not necessarily looking too happy. Some players are already injured, out for the first game already. And we're desperately, frantically searching around in the transfer market. And the fact remains that we haven't really meaningfully replaced Kid in Dewsbury Hall. We finally did get Buonanotte in, but he hasn't played a single minute of pre-season. So do you know what, Chris? I wouldn't be surprised if we do play a completely different way in the game. But then that means we're going into that game with no training really whatsoever. And to expect it to work first time round when you're playing against a team that finished 5th last season, that signed James Maddison, who was our best player the season that we got relegated, and is in their team, that's what we're up against, right? This is the Premier League. The Premier League is elite. It's the most competitive league in the world. It's one of the hardest leagues in the world. And we're going to be up against it. And it's going to be a long, tough season. That's my point.
It is 100%. And I think we are aiming for 17th.
100%.
you know, and anything over or above that is going to be, well, heaven, if you like. Look, I mean, I think I wanted Cooper to come in, and I still want Cooper to stay here. I'd love nothing more than him to do better than he got. I didn't realise that actually Burnley had offered him the job, and twice, in fact.
Really?
Well, he'd gone there, and he said, "Oh, let me have a think about it." And then Leicester week came in, and then they said to him, "Look, are you going to come?" And he said, "Well, how long have I got?" And they kind of said, "Well, look, if you don't want to come, we'll go elsewhere." And he was obviously hankering over the Premier League. And I suppose even without that, we are, no disrespect to Burnley, probably a better proposition. But I honestly think he's the guy that can keep us up, if anybody can, because he's done that at Forest. It's a baptism of fire that he's had, hasn't it? Like I say, he's come in as a new manager, and he's had most of the pre-season. Hopefully, he's got all his ideas out of his system now, and he's done that in games that don't matter. And maybe he's lulling Spurs into a false sense of security and thinking like they will beat us, then we'll go out and stuff them 5-0. I live in hope. But he's lost his best player as well. He's lost some other players like Kelechi and Acho, who we could probably do with now with Daka getting injured. But look, we're starting with Spurs and we're playing Aston Villa in the third game. And we've got a pretty decent start. We've got Spurs, Fulham, Villa, Palace, Everton, Arsenal. Mm-hmm. Those are our first 6 games. Fairness, not at all bad. It would have been horrible to have a position, especially if we end up with a points deduction. I don't know when that is going to happen. But to me, is Spurs a game I would look at and think we would get something from? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think we could. I'll be honest with you. I think there's only 3 games in a whole season that I don't think we have any chance, which is Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool. And the funny thing is sometimes in those games, because you have no chance, they're the ones that you end up getting a sneak result from.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I still remain optimistic as a fan. Look, I will say, even though I've been, like I say, I've said it many times, I've been extremely negative, but I'm just trying to point out what I see. Every manager needs some time to evaluate it. And I think after the first 5 to 6 games, normally I would say 10, but I think realistically, because of the Premier League and because we need to survive, like, for example, if we're 0 points after 5 games, I mean, he may not even be around. Let's just be honest, right? Because the club will not want to go down. But that's probably the best time. Yes, I think this comment that's come up, you should read in a moment. What I'm saying is, look, I will reserve judgment. I will look at it and see what we're doing. And look, at the end of the day, a few things. One, in 2015, we hired Claudio Ranieri, and there wasn't a single person who thought that was a good appointment. They thought it was a stupid appointment, and it turned out to be cheap. Did you? Okay. Well,
I actually still have it. At the time, I was actually writing a column for the Metro.
Oh, cool.
And I remember Metro Online, and I remember writing a bit saying, like, everybody is saying that this is a bad move, that he's never won anything, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at him, he's got Chelsea to second, he's got this team to second, he's won a couple of cups. So if this guy can get us to a top 5 position, which he has done with a lot of other clubs, we're going to be in heaven, So, and obviously he did better than that. So I actually said it was probably a fairly good performance. And I will always quote that until the day I die, that I was one of the few that believed in Claudio. But no, the point I was going to make was, yes, I think Spurs could be beatable as well. But they were a top 8 team last season. If we let's say we lost to Spurs but beat Fulham, that is probably, I would say, that was expected. Do you know what I mean? Because
you could draw against Spurs and then draw against Fulham, and that's not as good as getting battered by Spurs and beating Fulham.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
But the last time we played Fulham, they absolutely trounced us, if you remember.
And they've been playing well as well. But Ronald, like you said, the point he makes there, if you look at Steve Cooper's stats at Forest, they never won too many games away from the City ground. It would have been interesting if we'd had a pre-season game or two at the King Power.
Sure, but it's not a good stat if you don't win away games, is it? I think he only won 2 games in his time at Forest away from there, and that's awful. I mean, if that's going to be, you're going to be, because the one thing I would say, I hate to say it, but the King Power is not a fortress. We actually lost more games at home last season than we did away. So, it shows that we're not the best at that, and our fans are a bit fickle in that sense. But yeah, look, again, that's what I'm really hoping for. That's what I'm saying. Normally, when a promoted team comes up, and again, I remember the last time we came up from the Championship to the Premier League, Game 1, the atmosphere was electric. Everyone was so excited, and we got a draw, like I say. And it's because I could tell, the sort of crowd forced it through. Everyone was excited, and the players were up for showing what they could do. That could still happen. I very much hope it does. But yeah, as it stands, I think there's a lot of work to do and not much time to do it in. And who's even going to be in that starting lineup? I wouldn't be surprised if there's 3 brand new players that we've not seen before. Of course, it could work. Do you remember Lillian Nallis many years ago?
Yes.
We absolutely roasted Leeds 4-0, and he scored an absolute beauty. And that
was
one of those. I don't even know who these players are, but this is my new hero. I'm buying the Lillian Nallis shirt tomorrow.
Yeah.
We unfortunately went down that season, though. It's just one thing I've got to
We
point
did,
out.
but with more points than Leeds, so we got something. I'm going to 2 very quick questions, if you don't mind. I'm conscious of the time. Were we missing Cody in that last Long's game? Because I thought he'd done very well, and something that Kate said to me when she's been to a game where he's been playing, you hear him, he's there, he is the Wes Morgan, he's got that experience, and he will control that back line. Maybe he's not got the speed of Faz or whatever, but if Vestergaard does go forward, which he likes to do, and that's my next question in a second. But did we miss Cody, and should Cody be starting?
No to both questions, and I think it's so funny amongst the Leicester fan base how every time a player's not playing, they're all of a sudden the second coming of God. It's the same people that thought Harry Souttar was an incredible player, but he's gone on loan to Sheffield United. It's the same people who think Will Alves is going to go into the team and be the next Leo Messi. It's like there's a reason why managers aren't playing these players or putting them in. And if you look at the stats for Conor Cody last season, for the games that he started, the games that he played, he was basically worse than every single metric than Vestergaard, Fass, Justin, Doyle that started ahead of him. So maybe anything's possible, but seeing as we're playing a system with the back 3-2 shape that we played last season, to me, it seems pretty unrealistic to expect a player who is worse than our 3 that we started with last season to come in and be better. And it just feels for me a bit of a weird, people love a player who isn't particularly good. And I'm trying to be objective. I would say I've got data on my side rather than just opinion.
No. I mean, this is why I ask you the questions, to get the answers. And did Vestergaard make a difference when he came on? Because we seem to be playing higher up when he came on, but obviously by then I think the game was probably over anyway.
That's a good question. I would say that when he came on at the same time as Ricardo, and in both the games that he's come on, we've looked much better at playing the ball out from the back. However, I will caveat by saying that we've also looked a bit weaker on the transition as a result of that as well, because we're playing it out from the back more often. So there's pros and cons to it. But I'll be honest, I think when they're both on the pitch, we're more creative because we can construct something. And The Guardian did a pre-season preview for Leicester City, and their predicted position for us was 19. And I think something that they said Leicester really seemed to be struggling with their creativity, relying upon Harry Winks as their main creative outlet. And Harry Winks has 6 assists in 300 games at Premier League level. So if that's who we're relying on, I love Harry Winks. I think he's probably the best player that we have in the starting 11 at the moment, especially if Ricardo's not playing. But that is why, again, here are the stats. 3 games played. We didn't score any goals. We never looked like scoring. So we need to find a solution to the creativity. And that was Enzo's way. Enzo's way is that if you have a system, you can be creative without necessarily having world-class players because you're relying on the system to create your chances. In some of those clips I showed you, Wilfred Ndidi was getting multiple assists, and people say he can't do it. But if you don't have to think, if you just know that I run into that position and I do a first-time cross, it makes it very simple. So something to think about. But look,
a number of times last season, I can remember seeing Fatawu getting the ball on the right and just playing it into absolutely nowhere, and then suddenly left field, indeed he comes in off the edge of the screen, just gets it on the byline, and like you're saying, crosses it in. It was like, you put it in there, mate, and I'll just get on the end of it.
Yeah, we did do that move once out of all the clips I showed you against Augsburg, where he played it into Bobby Reed. But what I'm saying is that when I saw the preseason under Enzo, in every game, I saw that move 4 or 5 times a game, not once in 3 games, which is a very damning statistic. So you've got to kind of get that back. If we could do it, can they remember how that is? Can they remember how those chances were generated? I would say that it seems to me that a lot of our problems is that we're not able to take the ball from back and get it to the front. You know, that is the thing that's fallen apart. And again, I actually feel that's because we haven't been putting Vestergaard and Ricardo in the team. Enzo said last season, he says, well, normally with our team, if that back 5 plays well, we will probably win the game because that gives us the foundation on which to build on. So it's about choosing who's going to be in that team and for what reason. Just to try and play devil's advocate here, why might he be making that change? What I think he's trying to do is he's trying to make it so that if we get caught out in the transition, which is going to happen a lot in the Premier League because people are so much better athletically, you know, you're not going to have any of these people that have been eating all the pies like Gary Taylor-Fletcher back in the day at Premier League level.
Yes.
Is that he wants to make sure that when we're caught out, we're a bit more prepared so we can get into that defensive shape faster, which is why I believe he's pressing with 1 man less and he's wanting to put the more dedicated left back and Christensen into the team. But what I'm saying on a kind of systemic level is that, ironically, despite the fact that you're trying to set up to be better defensively, you would actually be better defensively by being more aggressive because you won't get into that position in the first place. So it's something to think about.
Attack is sometimes the best form of defense, isn't it?
Yes.
You know.
Yes, exactly.
Look, Anil, thank you so very, as always, mate. As always, your knowledge is incredible. And what you did there was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much. And look, new channel for Fox's sake. When it's going across the bottom there, subscribe, go over and subscribe to him. Look, we're all Leicester fans. We're all Leicester channels. We support each other. And if you want to know anything about football, this is the guy to be following. So get over there and follow him on Twitter as well, at For Fox's Sake TV, is it on Twitter?
It is indeed, yes.
There we go. Yeah, so go over there. And, of course, this channel as well, please do. And Neil, it is late, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so very, very, very much. Really do. I've loved doing that. Let's hope we don't see too much of that.
Exactly. Well, look, Chris, you're very welcome. Thank you for being so kind. And look, despite everything I've said, let's hope for a really good season. Let's get behind the lads. Those of you who are going to the game on Monday night, let's raise the roof. Let's push the boys on. I think Spurs, they're going to push up higher. They'll leave some spaces behind. We've got a chance. We've got some good players. Who knows? You might have some more tasty players by the time we start that game too.
And very interestingly, tomorrow night at 7:00, I will be joined by Rob Tanner, and we will both be predicting our league tables.
I've got a feeling we'll both have us in 17th, both of you. But,
I'm not saying anything. You need to tune in to find out.
Yeah.
I've no idea because Rob's not sent me his yet. But mate, all the best. Anyway, thanks very much and take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thanks very, very much to Anil there. I mean, what that guy knows is amazing. How he explains it, how he does all that is amazing. Make sure you get over there and make sure you subscribe to his channel. Hopefully we'll be doing more with him during the season. Always try and get him on to discuss games. I think what he's done tonight is pick out some very, very, very important points and things that need to be seen. I'm sure Steve Cooper knows about them as well. Look, we know it's going to be a hard season. Have you got your incontinent knickers ready? I will see you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Like I say, I'll be joined by the Athletics' Rob Tanner when we will be doing our predictions for who people are going to be finishing in the league. Is it going to be another Man City runaway? Are Leicester going to manage to avoid the bottom three? Very, very interesting. Thank you to everybody that's been in the chat on both channels and listened. If you have been listening via the YouTube podcast, thank you very much. We won't be putting this up on a full podcast because obviously it's not something you can listen to. You need to see it. If you are a member, thank you for your continued support. If you want to join being a member on LTID TV, it's only $1.99 a month. I will see you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. This has been LTID TV. I've been Chris. I will be back. Good night.
Thanks for watching. These videos are tremendous. You'd better like them too, or I'll be back.
This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network. TalkSport. Powered by fans.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.